So it's the next day, and what I want to do is bring you guys out here and let you hear Andrew's car now. So you heard it the first night. Exhaust was kind of muffled. Well, we remedied that, and I want to kind of go over with you guys again how I go about making one of these cars with a smaller kind of cam sound good. So I'm actually finishing up the base idle reset now. This is going to be the load part of the base idle reset. So we're gonna go ahead, turn his AC on, start the car up, and then we're just gonna stand back and listen to it. It's probably gonna change tones a couple times as the computer makes adjustments, but either way, let's go ahead and finish this up. As you can hear, the car starts to make adjustments. Now, I'm not gonna go through the whole process with you guys, but I'm gonna give you a couple pointers on how to make these things sound good, especially if you have a smaller cam. Now, if you have a really big cam, it's not gonna matter. This thing's gonna hit regardless. You gotta kind of help these cars out with mild compression, stock heads, and small cams. We'll talk about that in just a second. So you guys noticed that Andrew's car sounds obviously a lot better than it did the first night, and that's because of the exhaust. So we had to make a couple changes. Had to remove these mufflers right here. They're just really small mufflers, and they just kind of choked the car up. So we basically just went in, put some pipe in here, and that really opened this exhaust up. Now Andrew's car can breathe. So this is my theory with these cars, with small cams, and let's just say a stock engine, or even a mildly stock engine. When you have something like a B cam, you start getting into the F cam. These cars they're going to kind of hit regardless. I don't know why the F cam just sounds good, but when you're into these small cams like an E cam, B cam, stage 1 trick flow, the Anderson B21, which has actually got a pretty good bit of lift. But this is my theory. You really need to open the exhaust up for one thing, because what we notice in a good sounding car, like a chop, right, when it's got a nice sounding cam in it, is the pop, is the in between, right? It's the pop, 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 pop. That's what makes the car sound so good. Now, what that emulates, in my opinion, is a high compression car. So when you hear those lobes rolling around and this thing's chopping, it sounds a lot like a higher compression car. So this is my theory here. There's not a lot of pressure coming out of this thing. There's not a lot of compression, if you will. You really need to open your exhaust up so that cam can breathe and it doesn't get choked up. Meaning, you know, if you still got cats and you got a fairly quiet muffler, there's a good chance that pop, that sound, that chop, if you will, it's just not gonna make it out the exhaust the way it needs to. It doesn't have enough force behind it. The car doesn't have a lot of compression. It's just very lethargic, if you will. So think of it this way. You have these pops going on, right, in the exhaust, which gives you that cam sound, and they need to travel very freely out the exhaust and then kind of bam, resonate in the muffler here, which is why a chambered muffler sounds so good with these cars that don't have a large cam, and it just kind of echoes inside of this muffler, and it makes it sound like it's got a lot bigger cam than what it does. If you don't believe me, put some choked up exhaust on a car with a B cam or one of these cams or something like that, and see how much of the cam sound you lose. Now, on the other side of things, if you've got a high compression car with a solid roller cam, it doesn't matter what you do, that thing's gonna hit because it's forcing so much air out. I promise you, it's still gonna hit. You're gonna be able to tell that it's got a large cam in it. You just have to work with these smaller cams. This is just my backwoods shade tree theory, if you will. But what I can tell you is we've made some B cams, some stage 1 cams, and this B21 sound pretty good versus what they sounded like when we first got it running. In other words, if you put everything to spec, right? You set your TPS, you throw your cam in it, all your timing's right, and you just are like waiting for it to hit and just be, you know, earth shaking. It's probably not gonna do that until you tweak on the car a little bit, meaning there's more going on with the throttle body situation. So I'm gonna do my best to try to show you guys what I'm talking about and just explain it, but I'm not gonna mess with Andrew's car because it took me a little while to get this thing to finally sound right. So I'm just gonna try to explain it to you, and you guys play around with yours and see what you can come up with. Now the Calypso has an aftermarket computer, but that's irrelevant because I'm just explaining to you guys how you would handle this if you had a stock computer car. So now this is gonna kind of tie into the whole base auto reset, but I'm not gonna go into that. First thing you wanna do is make sure that your timing is set where you want it at. So somewhere around 12 to 14 degrees is gonna sound pretty good with your aftermarket cam. I typically like about 12 degrees. 14 still sounds pretty good though. So get your timing set where you want to. While the car is running, you can just come in and unplug your idle air control down here. And now what you wanna do is get back here on this throttle screw and start backing it off until the car will barely run, okay? It's gonna be similar to a base auto reset. So the car just needs to idle on its own. It doesn't have to run smooth. None of that matters. Switch the car off. Then come out, plug your idle air control back up, restart the car. Now at this point, the computer's gonna recognize that and it's gonna make all of its corrections and adjustments, if you will, right? Now that should get you somewhere up around about the 650, 700 RPM mark, somewhere around there. It's gonna depend on your car. And then what I want you to do is come out here and check your TPS and just make sure it's somewhere between, I like to keep mine somewhere between about 0.7 to about 0.98, something like that. Anywhere in there in that range will work just fine. So make sure your TPS is good. After that, if you don't like the sound of the car, if the car is either idling too high or too low, at that point, come back in here, unplug your idle air control again, and start playing with the throttle. Either lower it down a little bit or either raise it up. And sometimes it's just a touch, guys, just a touch. Just maybe move it that much, and if the car changes tones, stop, cut the car off, plug your idle air control back in, and try it again. That is the key to making one of these cars like sound good with a smaller cam. Set your timing and adjust back and forth on that throttle until you get the car to sound the way you want to, right? Now you're gonna need to do a base auto reset. That video is right here, so you guys can check that out if you don't know how to do it already. But these are the little things that's gonna make your car sound good. And the reason why that I say stay between like 0.7 and 0.9 maybe on your TPS is because as you adjust your throttle, you're going to change the voltage on the TPS, and that gives you a cushion to where you can move the throttle up a little bit, and it may raise up to 0.9 if you had it set at 0.8, or if you lower the throttle, it may go back down to like 0.7, which is all completely within range. So don't set your TPS at 0.98 and then go over here and try to raise the throttle up a little bit, because you're gonna push yourself out of range more than likely. Anyway, I hope you guys can go out, adjust on your car a little bit, maybe make it sound a little better. I'm telling you, it's a back and forth thing. You're gonna chase your tail, you're gonna get aggravated, you're gonna probably have to do a couple base auto resets, whatever, it's fine. But don't just think that you can slap the cam in the car, set the timing, and it's good to go. I promise you, your car can sound a lot better than what it does. Now, you may have hit the sweet spot the first time around. We never do. It always takes a little bit of playing around. The Retro Fox did not sound as good as what it does until we finally went in and made all those little tweaks, right? I'm telling you guys, there's something to it. Anyway, you guys experiment, play around with your throttle position a little bit. Make sure your TPS is within range, which I think is 0.5 to 1.25, I think. Just make sure it's within that range. Think of it this way. This is a stock car. It doesn't have a lot of compression. It's not gonna make a lot of power. That's not a big cam in that car. But there's a sweet spot where that cam can really work its magic and be itself. You can't force it one way or the other, or it's gonna lose a lot of the sound that it has. But you're able to put this cam in a perfect scenario if you work with it and just make it sing. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. And as always, thanks for watching. We're gonna let Papa T hold the camera real quick like. I'm gonna rev it up one time. I want you guys to hear the car when you rev it up.